In 2024, America's data centers quietly consumed about 4% of the entire nation's electricity. That may not sound dramatic until you realize this happened almost overnight, driven not by factories or cities, but by invisible software running on racks of servers. And the number is climbing fast. So here's the uncomfortable question hiding behind every AI-generated email, image, or search result. When artificial intelligence asks for more power, who actually pays for it? And who lives next to the power plant that makes it possible? Across the United States, the future no longer looks like sleek glass offices or green energy posters. It looks like windowless concrete buildings the size of stadiums, humming day and night, drawing as much electricity as a mid-sized city. In some places, these AI campuses rise on the ashes of old coal plants, shut down in the name of climate progress, then reborn as energy-hungry fortresses for machines. Software, once weightless, has become heavy industry again. How did we get here? Who benefits from this transformation? And what happens if this system keeps accelerating for another decade? To understand why AI has become an energy problem, we need to step back and redefine what artificial intelligence actually is in physical terms. AI is not just code, it is compute, billions of calculations per second, running on specialized chips, cooled by water and air, powered by electrons flowing through wires. Every query, every training run, every real-time inference draws power. And unlike many industries, AI demand is not flexible. It is always on. Data centers cannot simply shut down when electricity is expensive or when the sun is not shining. They need constant, reliable power, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This requirement changes everything. Traditional electricity demand rises and falls with human behavior. Mornings, evenings, seasons. AI flattens that curve. It creates a massive, continuous baseload, closer to a steel mill or aluminum smelter than to an office building. In 2024, data centers accounted for roughly 4% of U.S. electricity consumption. According to projections compiled from grid operators and the International Energy Agency, that share could double or more by the end of the decade. Globally, electricity use by data centers already rivals that of medium-sized industrialized countries. Why does this matter now? Because the energy system most countries built over the past 50 years was not designed for this kind of demand growth. Power plants take years to permit and build. Transmission lines take even longer, often facing political resistance from communities that do not want new infrastructure crossing their land. At the same time, many governments are trying to decarbonize their grids, retiring coal plants and limiting new fossil fuel projects. Into this fragile transition steps AI, demanding enormous amounts of power immediately, not in 10 or 20 years. The result is a collision between climate goals, economic incentives, and technological ambition. And nowhere is this collision more visible than in the deals being struck between big tech, electric utilities, and local governments. For technology companies, the logic is straightforward. AI is a winner-take-most race. More compute means better models, faster responses, and market dominance. Delays are unacceptable. If a grid connection takes too long, companies look for alternatives. They sign long-term power purchase agreements, build on-site generation, or locate data centers in regions with surplus electricity, cheap land, and friendly regulators. Reliability matters more than anything else. A few minutes of downtime can cost millions of dollars. For local governments, the incentives are equally clear. Data centers promise investment, construction jobs, and a steady tax base. In regions that have lost manufacturing or coal employment, an AI campus can look like salvation. Officials talk about future-proofing their economies, attracting global capital, and staying competitive in the digital age. Zoning rules are adjusted, tax abatements are offered, permits are fast-tracked. Utilities, caught in the middle, see both opportunity and risk. On one hand, data centers are perfect customers, large, predictable, and long-term. On the other hand, meeting their demand requires massive investments in generation and transmission. Someone has to pay for that infrastructure. And in many regulatory systems, those costs are spread across all ratepayers. This is where the story becomes personal. Because while AI companies negotiate bespoke deals and local governments celebrate ribbon cuttings, households open their electricity bills and wonder why prices keep creeping up. Small businesses worry about reliability as grids become more stressed. Communities near power plants deal with pollution, water use, and noise. The benefits of AI are global and abstract. The costs are local and concrete. In several U.S. states, this tension is already visible. Former coal plant sites, once shut down to reduce emissions, are being repurposed as data center hubs. The logic is compelling. These sites already have grid connections, cooling water access, and industrial zoning. But to guarantee uninterrupted power, some projects rely on new natural gas generation built specifically to serve data centers. Climate advocates see betrayal. Residents see mixed promises, cleaner than coal but still polluting, more jobs, but fewer than advertised. This pattern reveals a deeper contradiction. AI is often marketed as a tool for efficiency, optimizing energy use, reducing waste, accelerating the transition to renewables. Yet, the first order effect of AI deployment is a surge in energy consumption. Efficiency gains may come later, but the infrastructure must be built now, and the fastest way to build reliable power today is often through fossil fuels. Zooming out, this is not just a domestic issue. It is a geopolitical one. Compute has become a strategic resource alongside oil, gas, and rare earth minerals. Countries that can supply abundant, reliable electricity gain an advantage in the AI race, while those that cannot risk falling behind. The United States currently hosts roughly 45% of global data center electricity consumption. China follows with about a quarter, and Europe accounts for around 15%. Each region faces different constraints. China can mobilize state-owned utilities and build power plants quickly, but faces its own energy security and emissions challenges. Europe, with higher electricity prices and stricter climate regulations, struggles to attract large-scale AI infrastructure. The US, with relatively cheap energy and deep capital markets, has become the default location for hyperscale expansion. This concentration of compute has consequences. It shapes where AI talent migrates, where supply chains form, and where geopolitical leverage accumulates. In the Cold War, industrial capacity defined power. In the AI age, it may be energy-backed compute capacity that does. And then there is the money. Building AI infrastructure at this scale is staggeringly expensive. Training a frontier model can cost hundreds of millions of dollars in compute alone. Data center campuses run into the tens of billions. According to reporting cited by Reuters, financing for AI and data center infrastructure surged from around $15 billion in 2024 to as much as $125 billion in 2025. As banks and private capital rush to fund the build-out, this raises an uncomfortable parallel. In the late 1990s, investors poured money into fiber optic cables, convinced that internet traffic would grow endlessly. They were right about the growth, but wrong about the timing. The result was massive overcapacity and spectacular bankruptcies. Today, some analysts ask a similar question about AI. Will demand grow fast enough to justify the infrastructure being built? Or will today's energy-intensive campuses become tomorrow's stranded assets? The answer matters, because debt does not disappear when optimism fades. If AI revenues disappoint or energy costs spike, the financial stress will ripple outward into utilities, local governments, and pension funds that back the projects. Once again, risk may be socialized while gains remain private. The social consequences are already emerging. In communities hosting large data centers, residents report increased strain on water resources used for cooling, constant industrial noise, and land prices rising beyond what locals can afford. Jobs often turn out to be fewer and more specialized than promised. A data center employs far fewer people than a factory of comparable size. The narrative of economic revival does not always match lived reality. Meanwhile, consumers everywhere experience the indirect effects. Electricity grids become tighter, peak demand grows, utilities invest billions in upgrades, then petition regulators to raise rates. The link between an AI query and a higher power bill is invisible, but it exists. International comparisons make the trade-offs clearer. In parts of Scandinavia, abundant hydroelectric power and cool climates have attracted data centers with relatively low emissions. But even there, local opposition has grown as electricity prices rise and energy exports shrink. In Asia, some countries aggressively subsidize power for data centers, treating AI as a national priority. This boosts competitiveness, but distorts energy markets and strains public finances. There is no simple villain in this story. The system behaves exactly as incentives dictate. Companies optimize for speed and reliability. Governments chase investment. Utilities respond to demand. The outcome, a surge in energy use and infrastructure pressure, is the logical result of rational decisions made in isolation. So what can change? Solutions exist, but all involve trade-offs. Improving energy efficiency of AI models can reduce power per task, but may be offset by growing usage. Building more renewable energy helps, but only if paired with storage and grid upgrades. Pricing electricity dynamically could shift some demand, but AI's always-on nature limits flexibility. Governments can demand more transparency from companies about energy use and ensure that infrastructure costs are not unfairly shifted onto households. Longer term, societies must decide how much compute they actually want and for what purpose. Not every application justifies the same energy footprint. Treating AI as critical infrastructure means applying the same scrutiny we apply to highways, power plants, and water systems. Looking ahead, 3 futures are possible. In the optimistic scenario, investment in grids, storage, and efficiency keeps pace with AI growth. Clean energy scales rapidly, and AI becomes a tool that genuinely accelerates decarbonization. In the pessimistic scenario, energy bottlenecks worsen, fossil fuel dependence deepens, and public backlash stalls both climate policy and technological progress. The middle path is messier: uneven development, rising costs, and ongoing political fights over who pays. The story of AI and electricity is not really about machines, it is about choices. About how societies allocate resources, distribute costs, and define progress. Behind every glowing server rack is a web of power lines, contracts, and communities. And behind every technological leap is an old question asked in a new form: progress for whom and at what price? If there is a lesson here, it is that the future is never weightless. Even the most abstract technologies rest on physical systems and human decisions. The age of AI is not just being coded in data centers, it is being wired into our grids, written into our utility bills, and negotiated in town halls far from Silicon Valley. The machines may be learning faster than ever. The question is whether we are learning fast enough to govern the world we are building around them